So let's deviate into energy very quickly, because I keep saying this is the lifeblood of everything. If we look at United States production from, 1920 through to current, more or less, we'll notice that sometime around 1970, the United States hit a peak of oil production. We have the most mapped, most highly technologically sought after and drilled well complex on the face of the planet. And despite all of those efforts, despite technology advancing enormously from here to here, despite every effort, we hit a peak, and we are past that peak of oil production. That's a fact. And the other fact in this is that in order to fill the gap between what we can produce and what we want to consume, or do consume, we have to import the remaining balance. So that orange wedge pretty closely approximates to the barrel how much we've been importing. So if we thought, well, the problem is we're not getting enough oil out of the ground, so what we're going to do is drill as much as we can to get more, the fact of the matter is we might have a predicament on our hand, which is that no matter how much we drill, no matter how many new miles of coastline we open up, that we will not be able to exceed and surpass our former peak. So we're going to have to find ways to get that energy that we need so vitally to run our economy from elsewhere, and that's what we've been doing. This is a chart that shocked me when it came out in November of 2008. The International Energy Agency is an international body that is governed and tasked with the job of figuring out how much oil we've got. And up to 2007, they'd been doing this in a way. And the way they'd been doing this, they said, well, the economy is going to grow by that much between here and there, so how much oil do we need? That's how much we're going to get. In 2008, they said, hey, what if we actually add up all of the databases that show all of the individual oil fields and sum them? Then what do we get? All of a sudden, they had a very different story. Instead of this maximum bar in 2030 going to 130 million barrels a day, they had to walk that back to 105 million barrels a day. So that was shocker one. Shocker two is that this line, I put this on when I first saw the chart, but we could move this red line over, but it still tells the same story. They also admitted that we are past peak on conventional oil. That's this big blue blob on the bottom. What's conventional oil a euphemism for? It's a euphemism for cheap and easy. This is the stuff you stick the straw in the ground and the stuff comes shooting out. It's not under 5,000 feet of water and another 13,000 feet of overburden. This is the stuff that's on dry land, near to the surface. You get it out, and it's light and sweet. Well, how are we going to make up the difference to even get to that 105 million? Well, we know of some fields that we have, but we have to develop them. That's that light blue sphere-ish area. And then that next piece is red, which is crude oil from fields yet to be found. That's our plan. We're sticking to it. And that's just to get to 105 million barrels a day. There was an industry task force on peak oil that was put together by a consortium of 5 United Kingdom companies, Richard Branson's Virgin being one of them, companies that are intimately concerned with the issue of oil. And they came up with a different estimate. They thought that the max flow rate of oil that we would get out through their own internal sort of bottoms-up analysis was somewhere between 95 and maybe 100 million barrels per day. So they put a cap down there somewhere. So we start looking at these two different analyses, and we start to come up with the uncomfortable conclusion that even with these estimates, we might be looking at an actual peak somewhere between 2010 and 20, right, in the next 10 years. But then the real shocker of a chart came out. This came out from the Department of Energy. A gentleman named Glenn Sweetnam was responsible for producing the Department of Energy's outlook, and he produced this chart, and he's since been reassigned. But the chart is now out in the internet, so it's part of the permanent record. And this chart really shocked me because here the DOE was saying very explicitly that starting in 2012, that's our peak, unless we can start to fill that gap with unidentified projects. Unidentified projects. All the rest of these have sort of been mapped and looked at. So now we have 3 different sources: an industry task force, the International Energy Agency, and the Department of Energy, all triangulating on a narrow window that's happening sometime in the early 2000 teens, between now and 2013-14. We've got a number of things bearing down on that point. And the Deepwater accident only compounds this problem because we're going to have a delay, some form of a delay, 6 months that we know about, but maybe more, in our deepwater exploration efforts, which is important because that's where almost all of the new oil is coming from, all the new marginal oil. So yeah, that's an issue. It means that quantity of oil is an issue. Quantity, flow rates, millions of barrels a day, quantity. But there's a second issue out there that's still not being widely talked about that's just as important, maybe more important. And it goes like this. I don't care how much it costs in dollars, yen, euros to actually get energy out. Let's ask the question, how much energy do we get out given how much energy we had to put in? So if we put a barrel of oil in to an exploration project and we get 50 barrels back out, we're on that far left end of this chart. So expressed in percentages, that would be 98% return, right? We put 1 in, 50 out. It's like putting 2 in, getting 100 out. So what this chart is looking at is asking the question, how much energy did we have to use in order to get energy? The green is the stuff we care about, because that's the surplus energy we get to use to get to work and be in buildings like this and lead our lives and enjoy rich economic complexity. The red stuff is our cost. That's what we have to invest in order to get more out. And you might notice here that this crosses at 1. And it does that because as soon as you're putting 1 barrel in to get 1 barrel out, you're spinning your wheels. You mean you can do it to keep busy, but there's really no point. Well, it's this green stuff we care about, really. And so when we started exploring for oil, first thing we noticed is back in the 30s, we were getting 100 to 1 returns, we think. Maybe it was even higher. But by the 70s, that had gone down to maybe 25 to 1. Really no big deal, though. Look how much green is under this. You'll notice this isn't a linear chart. It has nonlinear behavior. We notice that we don't go from a straight line from 101 to 1 to 1. We do this funny thing. And then in the 1990s, we thought, well, there were some estimates that maybe somewhere between 18 to 1 and 10 to 1. Those were our returns. Still lots of green under that territory, if you mentally look at the amount of green under that oval. Oil today, deep water finds, maybe 3 to 1. Big question mark, because we don't actually have a comprehensive commission asking this question in a comprehensive way. So we don't know what the true answer is, but it's certainly less than it used to be. So we're sneaking down this curve a little bit. And this is important because if we have to run our society off of this green part and we're suddenly having to run it off of 3 to 1 returns, it means that we're living in this world. And if we wanted to run our society completely on corn-based ethanol, this is the world we'd be living in. Horrible returns. Corn-based ethanol might make good economic sense. It might make great political sense. But boy, does it make terrible energy sense. You cannot cram the society in which we are accustomed and which I hope to pass off to my children into this green bar. This is a very different world. So it turns out that, yes, quantity, how many millions of barrels are coming out, that is important. But quality, that is, how much net energy are we getting back out? That's the real issue. So I would invite you, if you read about things like how many Saudi Arabias are locked in shale oil, understand that is the lowest quality oil we've got. Its returns might be sub 2 to 1, we think. We don't know. But it's certainly not the same as putting a straw in the ground and getting a gusher. So quality is an issue. So now I'm going to connect those first 2 E's. We've got this economy which must grow. And we have an energy system which I think prudent adults could start to say, I have concerns as to whether it can grow. Maybe it can't. Well, what happens when you connect something that has to grow with something that can't grow? Which of these 2 things wins? I always lean towards the reality side, right? Because this is a real physical limit. And I would invite you, as you're thinking about these issues, if you do, going forward, to consider both quantity and quality. Because both of those are factors in this story, and they're equally important. All right, how about the environment? What's the story there? Interesting story. It's kind of the same one. I'm just going to flip it a little bit. These guys right here, kind of at the dawn of the industrial age, we had cameras, at least. They're sitting on a copper nugget. I would invite you to go on as long a tour as you want of the United States and find a similar nugget. They're all gone. They disappeared a long time ago. That's okay. We moved on to the next best thing. We found nuggets, smaller ones, and those went away. And so we moved on to this is beautiful copper ore, 10%. Look at that bright green band. Awesome stuff. And then we moved on to the next best thing. So this is the Bingham Canyon mine. Its ore grade is 0.2%. This is a hole in the ground, 3/4 of a mile deep, 2.5 miles across. And it used to be a mountain. And we actually just did this to give the engineers a challenge. Don't worry, there's plenty of copper. No, we're doing this because we have to. We're doing this because in 150 years of industrialization, we've gone through all the car-sized nuggets, the smaller nuggets, the good stuff, and we're doing this. And we're not doing this because we want to. We're doing this because this is where the copper exists in the United States today. So if we look at this, we say, well, we could sort of generalize. What does a resource extraction profile look like? Well, first you go after the big nuggets, and then the smaller ones, then the better ore grades, and then you're down to the 0.2% stuff. And you'll notice that the total amount of stuff you get out of the earth follows a bell curve. It goes up and up and up, then goes down and down and down. And that's the same sort of extraction profile we see for oil. And we can say a couple things about this. If we're mining that copper, we can say one thing for sure, that the energy cost of that is not linear. The difference between pulling out giant nuggets and making huge holes in the ground in terms of how much energy it takes to get that stuff out of the ground, it follows some sort of a J curve as well, some sort of a hockey stick of its own. And what parallels the cost of energy? Of course, cost. So we could measure that in dollars. But that's really just a proxy for the other costs that are involved. Dollars are usually just proxies. So this is a story that we could tell for dozens of key minerals at this point in time, ranging from silver to tin to bauxite, lead, uranium. All of them are sort of in the sphere of resource extraction, and we're sort of in the same place with them. So now let's connect all three. We've got this economy that must grow. It's connected to this energy system that we think maybe can't grow anymore, and we have a number of key important minerals that we rely on that are depleting. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in 10 years, but certainly in my children's lifetime, for many of them, we can see that end. And so this is a very serious issue. Now the question becomes, is this a problem or predicament? Are we going to solve this by applying better technology, or is this something we're going to have to start managing the outcome and thinking about this? Now, if we're treating this as an outcome that we have to manage, it means that reduce, reuse, recycle is no longer just a feel-good slogan of the lefty greenies. It becomes an operational imperative for corporations, for societies. It becomes something where we have to manage our waste streams as though they're not waste streams, but they're actually resource streams. We have to start thinking and flipping our entire story around if this story I've told you is correct. And we want to manage it, manage the outcome of it. The implications of the story to me are pretty clear. Economists tend to ignore the other two E's in this story, environment and energy. They're externalities. They just assume, here's a joke. If you put 3 economists in a basement and you lock them there, they're not going to worry about getting hungry because they know that soon their grumbling bellies will make sandwiches appear. Economists assume that if demand is there, somehow all the other stuff just arises, right? They had a theory about maggots and flies and meat once upon a time that was almost the same, right? The implications are that we're going to try the old tricks. We're going to dump trillions upon trillions of dollars into the system, and we're going to expect the same behaviors we saw in the past that will jolt the economic patient back to life, and we'll just carry on as if it was just a bad part of the story we could soon forget. If I'm correct, it means that there's this source of inputs and resources that are flowing through the economy that support its structure. And when we start pinching that off and that stuff starts going away, either due to quality or quantity, either of those two cues, it means that we'll dump all this money and we'll be baffled. Unemployment will still be there. We won't be able to figure it out because it won't make sense in our economic framework. We'll start looking at why do we have to keep cutting our budgets? Where's the recovery we were looking for? We don't understand. We're not getting the traction we were expecting. There'll continue to be economic volatility in the financial markets. It'll be baffling. None of this stuff that we're seeing today is actually all that surprising to me. It's stuff that I predicted a while ago because I was wearing a lens that had all 3 E's in it, not just the economy. The economy to me is an abstraction that sits on top of those other 2. It's a lens I look through. It's the lens that I prefer to choose to tell me and give me feedback about what's going on. But the real story is sitting in these other 2 pieces for me. So this is all stuff that I think would be implications if the story I'm telling you is correct. These would be sort of predictions, if you will, as to how this goes. So what do we do? What needs to be done here? I have fashioned this story in a way that almost anybody can interact with it. One of the things I'm most proud of, started my website a little over a year and a half ago. Of the 800-plus sites that are linking in, my small staff and I, we tried to figure out who actually is linking into our site. And we've done no link campaigns so far. And we tried to put them in bins. We spent a good couple hours at it, and we couldn't do it. We had John Birch linking in. We had Daily Costs linking in. We had very green, ecocentric sites linking in. We had NASCAR linking in. We had every religion linking in. So we couldn't really figure it out, and it's because I specifically built this story not to figure out, this is not about left-right anymore. This is not about old-young. It's not about rich-poor. It's not Republican, Democrat. It's nothing about those normal axes. This is a story that impacts us all. We all have to be able to interact with it, everybody. So I worked very hard to strip out the left-right stuff because now I think, just as if you got a hot dog and weren't paying attention and waited for the last 5 minutes to begin working on your handcuffs, that now we're in a state where it's critically important that we begin to make the right choices over the wrong choices. That when you're in those final few minutes where that water's coming up, your choices, the impact of those becomes magnified enormously.